I'm Dede Yao, and I am here to interview Sue Hopkins. We are at the yoga studio, Yoga Etc., on West Avenue in Cartersville. It is June 17th, 2019. So you have been in the area for quite a while, and you and your husband and your children, and now grown, have made many contributions. Let's start with how you came here and what you were doing when you first came here.
Okay. We moved to Cartersville, or to Bartow County. We actually live out in Taylorsville area, 79 and 80, between Christmas and New Year's of 79 and 80. We moved here because of my husband's job. He was working for an industrial gas company that was located off of Windy Hill, and we wanted to get as far away from Atlanta as we could and still make it a reasonable commuting distance for him to get there. So that's how we ended up. We are both originally from Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. I was working as a registered dental hygienist. I went to Temple University in Philadelphia, and I was working as a hygienist shortly after we moved here.
And you have since had two boys, and go ahead with that.
Well, both of our children were born. It was before children when we moved here. I think when we came here we had 3 dogs and 2 cats or something like that. We're actually in the very same home that we moved into in 78 or 79. Our children were born here. Our oldest son was born in 81, and our second son was born in 85, and they both have gone through Cartersville City Schools. So as when they were children, we were involved in the typical sports that your kids get involved in and my husband was actually coaching t-ball and baseball and football while they were younger, and then when they got into middle school, they started going into the school sports.
Well, and I know that Chris was a big soccer player, and
you
played a role in soccer, did you not?
When he first started playing soccer, it was really new to Cartersville. Like, nobody really knew what soccer was. He was, I think, a U9 at the time, so that would have been in the early 90s. And soccer was really different here, was just being introduced into Bartow County at the time. But he really got into it, so of course Mike and I were involved in it as well, and for a few years we did some volunteering with the Referee Association, mm-hmm. and I worked as a referee assigner when Cartersville started the Cartersville Clash, which was their competitive sports where other people would come here to play soccer. So we always needed to provide refs for that too.
So you were raising children, you were taking them to all these sporting events, but you also had your career as a dental hygienist, did you not?
Yes, I worked from, the only time I was off was a few years, well, when my first son was born for about a year, but then I was off about 2 years when my second son was born. But other than that, I worked in Cartersville as a dental hygienist. So between working as a hygienist and dealing with the public, in that way, and having children in the school system, and we got to know a lot of people in the community. Even though we don't live right in Cartersville, we are in Bartow County, and I was working here in Cartersville, so it just made more sense at that time for me to bring the boys in here to go to school, because I was there and I could run over for the Thanksgiving luncheon and all of that kind of stuff. It was just really convenient for us.
Homeroom activities,
yeah, all the homeroom
that they
stuff,
do.
Yeah.
So we are here now in your second yoga studio. How did you make that journey from being a dental hygienist to creating one of the most amazing yoga teacher training programs in the Northwest Crescent?
It was an evolution, for sure. Mm-hmm. When I was working as a hygienist, I was having a lot of trouble with lower back and neck and shoulder issues because of positioning and stress of the job and, running kids around and all that other stuff. I'm just one of those people that hold stress in their back. A lot of people hold it in different places. Some people may get headaches or stomach issues or something, but that's where everything kind of landed with me. And the positioning of dental hygiene wasn't always the
Didn't you do the pump thing with one foot?
Well, it's a rheostat. You just push on it. You don't really pump it, but then as
you had to turn your body.
As a yoga person now, I understand as I did that habitually 40 hours a week, had one leg longer and twisted 90% of my day, that was taking a toll on my back. So yoga just, I didn't really know that much about yoga. This was probably in 93 or 94, but it just seemed like, that stretching would feel good to me. I didn't, of course, like I said, know nothing. I thought I knew something about it, but I didn't. But at that time, there weren't even DVDs or any place to go to learn yoga. So when I first started practicing yoga, I would open a book. It's called 78 Days to Yoga, Richard Hittleman. And I would just look at the picture and try and imitate what I saw on that picture. And that, for my back, I started doing some yoga on my own. At that time, I also started doing massage therapy. And back, in the early 90s, that was still kind of an odd thing to do.
You mean seeing a massage therapist for your own?
Yes. And I also had established a meditation practice at that time. So it was like I was using a lot of different complementary tools to help with this, seeing chiropractors and all of that. But it was interesting, after I had been practicing on my own for like a year or so, people would say things to either me or Mike, wow, you seem a lot happier these days. Or somebody asked Mike one time, did Sue quit her job? She seems a lot more like at ease. Did she get to quit her job? So I was doing it for the physical reason, the stretching for physical reasons.
Right.
I thought, boy, there's something more to this than just stretching, and like, what is that connection? And I did feel, of course, I felt better physically, so it's easier to have a calmer mind. But I was starting to understand that it worked both ways. A calm mind let you feel better physically, as well as the ease in your physical body would calm that tension that we would hold in our mind. So a lot, people were noticing and they were asking me what I was doing. So in '99, I got a studio space from a dance school here in town who didn't have classes on Sundays. So there was a big open space, which is all you need to do yoga.
Where was that located?
It was over on Henderson Drive. It was a friend of mine that had a dance school over there at the time. And I said, hey, can I use your studio on Sunday afternoons? She goes, yeah, sure. So I advertised, and this is in Bartow County in 1999, classes for yoga classes, and I had 20 people show up. And I was really surprised because I didn't know, or I didn't expect that people would really be interested in yoga. It was before it was mainstream. It was still like, yoga, what is that? That's stretching, right? Is what a lot of people would say, oh, that's that stretching stuff. So I did classes there for a while, but I didn't really have any background to teach, any teaching background. And the more that I tried to guide people through yoga practices, the more I knew that I really wasn't qualified to do that. So
you hadn't done any training
I had not done
up to
any
this
teacher
point.
training.
You were self-taught.
Yeah, and I was, I had been practicing about 4 years, so I had been through a lot of books. It was still around the time when VHS was coming out, and I actually got to see people do it on a tape, but there was still nowhere to go close by at that time. So I started looking for a teacher's training because I really loved the idea of giving people the tools so they can take care of themselves. That's the cool thing about yoga. With those other modalities that I mentioned, like the complementary things, it's always something's being done to you. Massage therapy or a chiropractor or any of that. It's like you're the passive recipient of this, right? Yeah. Any of those, which are really good. I mean, there's certainly a place for them. But the thing that I like about yoga, especially as I've taught it all these years, is that I can teach people something to do that they can do on their own whenever they need it. If it's a stretch that helps them, or a breath work, or the idea of a meditation in some way that they have control over how they feel. So I wanted to do a teacher training because I really love teaching, but I just felt that there was so much I didn't know about it because, like you
Right,
said, I was
right.
pretty much self-taught.
Yeah.
So at the time I started looking for teacher training, now often more times than not, about 90% of them are done on weekends. But at that time it was really unusual to find one that was done on a weekend. They were like, oh, go to Bahamas for 3 months. Or
They weren't
go to
for working
India.
people.
They weren't for working people with young children and a traveling husband, for sure. You know, so that all played a part into it. But it's funny how there's a saying in yoga, like, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So I found this teacher training in Asheville, and it happened to be in the Iyengar, which is a very alignment-based practice, and it was just what I needed. So I went up to Asheville, and I did just a weekend workshop just to check them out a little bit, to see if I liked them or what I thought of them. And I did decide that I liked that style of yoga, which again is very safe, very alignment-based, very accessible to anybody, no matter what their physical conditions are. So I did the teacher's training. I started it in '99, and 2001 is when I graduated.
So you were going on the weekend?
I was going some weekends, not every weekend.
Okay.
And it was really spread out. It wasn't even one weekend a month. But I had to be, in that teacher training, I had to be teaching while I was doing the teacher training, and I had to practice, and I had to journal everything I did, and I was still working as a dental hygienist, and I had an 8-year-old and an 8, 9 to 12-year-old, you know. So there were a number of times during that training that I'm like, I can't do this. I just really can't do this anymore. And a couple of times that my family just encouraged me to keep going with it, and you know, I did complete it, and then I felt registered with the Yoga Alliance. The Yoga Alliance is an organization that doesn't certify yoga teachers. You do your training someplace else, but if you have a certain number of hours that qualify you to register, then they register yoga teachers. And so they just have a list of teachers, and anybody on that page, you know that they have had a certain number of hours of training. So I registered with the Yoga Alliance in 2001, and when people register with them, they get a number on their card. And so I always remember my number was 1,490. So when I registered as a registered yoga teacher in 2001, there were 1,489 yoga teachers who were registered in the United States.
There are now.
Over 100,000.
Gosh.
One of my students told me that her number, and that was 6 years ago, was like 96,000.
And
so
of course
I'm
now
sure
you're
it's over
training
100.
teachers who go
Yeah.
on themselves to register.
And do other teacher trainings too.
And
so.
do other teacher trainings too.
So I didn't really intend to open a yoga center. I mean, you know, that wasn't even really in the back of my mind. What I did was borrow space from anybody that would let me use it. So I was in the dance studio I talked about. I had been in a couple of the gyms here in Cartersville. There were a couple churches in their community centers or something like that where I could do yoga.
That welcomed you to do yoga.
That welcomed me to do yoga. So I had yoga mats, straps, blocks, all the blankets and everything in the back of my car.
In your
it was
car.
like, have yoga will travel. You know, I'd go from one location to the other. And the only reason that I actually had a yoga center or thought about that was like, it would be really nice to be able to control the temperature of the room, or to not lug that stuff around all the time, or to some extent be able to control the volume of the noise in and outside the room, and just to create an atmosphere where people knew that's what we did. It wasn't like we shared it with weightlifters and then the weightlifters would go in, the yoga people would come in, you know, it was that sense of an energy of the place that I wanted, that calming energy. And I remember shortly after I opened, one of my students came in, she goes, I'm going, that's what I wanted. You know, I wanted people to come in and know that that was the result they were going to get, that sense of relaxation. So I just kind of kept my eye out for a place. I really didn't know what I wanted. I had
Well, I want you to mention some of the places that you worked before. It's not as if all of a sudden you said, yoga center, and it popped up.
Well, right. I started teaching in '99. So I opened the first yoga center in 2002. So there were a lot of people in Cartersville who knew I taught yoga. So
yeah.
it wasn't like I just hung out the shingle and was hoping that they would show up. I was also teaching, maybe not before, but right around the time when I opened the yoga center for Floyd Medical Center in Rome, which is how I got more into the yoga therapy than the fitness aspect of yoga. And when I first opened the yoga center, I actually taught a number of different places to help support the yoga center. I was still working 3 days a week as a hygienist at that time, but I taught for local industries, including Shaw Industry, and I taught at the Senior Aquatic Center when they first opened the swimming pool out there, the therapeutic swimming pool, which is a wonderful place to practice yoga because your joints are happier there. I taught at Darlington High School for the students when they, because a lot of the students at Darlington are residential, they were required to do an after-school program. So we offered yoga as one of the things that they could pick.
And what year was this, Sue?
That was in 2004.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was teaching at, like I had said, Floyd Medical Center, at the Women's Center. They were really ahead of their time because they brought in a holistic doctor from Canada, and she set up a women's center, which was back at the old mall near Berry College. I don't know if you remember that old mall back there. And they set up a women's center there, and her goal was to offer a lot of those complementary modalities that we had mentioned before. So she brought me in to do yoga and meditation. And the way that she found me, which you know how connections are always made, but I had been teaching meditation for a doctor who had a retreat center as an oncologist, who set up a center for people who had been through cancer treatments. So he had invited me up there to do meditation for them. I did a little bit of yoga, although there was another person that did yoga. And I also did some presentations for the doctors at Floyd Medical Center about mindfulness, you know, as they move from patient to patient and stuff like that. Well, this female doctor who was running the yoga, or the Floyd Medical Women's Center, met me there. And she was just in the setup stage of Floyd Medical Center. So she invited me to come and do yoga and meditation there for her. But you know, I was teaching a lot of yoga in a lot of different places, even though I had now established the yoga center on Irwin Street, on 18 South Irwin, which is a very traditional yoga center, hardwood floors. It's small, you know, it's kind of quiet and secluded. It's only about 1,000 square feet, so it was just like a good place to start. But I was also traveling to all these other places to do yoga. So I was like teaching yoga, but I wasn't really living yoga too well, you know, and I was scattered and drawn in all different ways. So shortly after that, in 2004, I did that for a couple years. I stopped working as a dental hygienist to do yoga full time. So I was still traveling different places, but eventually, you know, you can tell when it's run its course. The Floyd Medical Center they closed that down years ago. It wasn't making money the way they wanted a medical doctor to make money, and she wouldn't, you know, see people to prescribe antibiotics or any of those things. So she actually went back to Canada, and they closed that down. And I went to the hospital at Floyd and taught for nurses a few sessions after that. But eventually, I knew that I had to stop this running back and forth to everything. And if I really wanted to put all my attention and work into the yoga center, I had to be there. So I started being at Etowah Valley Yoga probably 7 days a week.
Wow. How many classes were you offering at that time?
About 21. Which was,
were you the sole
I was at
teacher?
the time. I know.
Because you hadn't started your teacher training yet.
I hesitate to admit that to anybody because that wasn't very yogic either, living that yoga lifestyle.
It's also running a business.
But it was running a business. But it seemed like, in hindsight, that it was just a perfect storm for a yoga center to happen in Cartersville. Yoga all of a sudden was on Time magazine. They were, you know, Oprah was doing yoga. There were, you know, people were exposed to it. When I first opened in 2002, I would tell people I'm opening a yoga center, and you wouldn't believe how many people said, now what flavors of yogurt are you going to sell? They didn't even know what it was.
Yoga.
But by 2004, they were like, oh, okay, this isn't, this is exercise, or that's my tagline over there was yoga. It's more than just stretching, because that's what everybody would say. Well, yoga, that's that stretching stuff, So being able to not work as a dental hygienist and having my own place and having being embraced by the community, and the fact too that when I opened, there were a number of students that came with me. There were when I opened in 2002, I did this special called Yoga for a Year, and I hate to say it now because my people who do yoga for a year now are going to go, really? I offered it for $375 a year.
Wow.
So it was and I had 20 or 30 people that did it, so I had a bit of capital to work with.
Yeah, and they could come anytime they wanted to practice, come to any class. Okay.
Yeah. But in the meantime, I was being more drawn to the health benefits of yoga rather than the fitness benefits, the therapeutic aspect of yoga. So I continued to do a lot of training on my own. After I had registered with the Yoga Alliance, I went ahead and registered probably in 2004 at the next level, which was a 500-hour registered yoga teacher.
And you had to do training to get that.
Yes, you had to do 300 hours of additional training. At that time, there were not yoga schools that offered that. So I was able to take bits and pieces from different trainings, and I had to send it in to them. And
were you traveling to do that?
I would sometimes I was traveling. Most of the time, it was either Asheville, or I went to Yogaville a number of times, which is a very therapeutic ashram kind of area in Virginia. And did some in Krippala, which is in Massachusetts.
Right.
But around that time, I found a group called Integrative Yoga Therapy. Joseph LePage and his wife Lillian were offering, they're actually from Brazil. They're Americans, but they have a retreat center in Brazil. And they would come to the United States and offer trainings here. So I did a number of trainings with them in their yoga therapy training.
Is that in California?
I went to Pennsylvania a couple times. The longest 2-week training part of it was in California. And when I was training with students out there, so this was in like 2007, I was in a group with about 60 certified registered yoga people, yoga teachers. And it was amazing to me some of the questions that they were asking in class, and I would think, if you're a registered yoga teacher, you should probably know the answer to that question. And I realized, my students had said, oh, you need to do yoga teacher training, and I'm going like, no, I'm not qualified to do that. I'll never do that. I'll never do yoga teacher training. I've been around long enough. But I realized when I was out in California with Joseph and that group that my students knew as much as these yoga teachers who had been through other programs.
Your students that were just regularly coming to your classes.
And the way that I would instruct, I would use a lot of these ideas and principles, if it be therapeutic or for mind, body, or spirit. So when I was out there, I decided maybe I could do a teacher training. So when I came back, I had graduated. That was a 1,000-hour yoga therapy program that I did. Some of it was done as a mentorship at home, but some of it was contact hours. So I thought, well, maybe I can do a teacher training, because it seems like a lot of people are interested in that. So in 2007, I applied to Yoga Alliance to have both a 200-hour school and a 500-hour school, and got my information from them right before Thanksgiving, the day before Thanksgiving, that I was approved as yoga teacher training schools. And it was like, oh no, now I'm really going to have to do this. Like, now what am I going to do? I didn't really think that this was going to happen. So I started teaching a 200-hour in 2008, and I did it in 9 months. They started in January and they ended in September. Weekends. I also offered a summer intensive program where I would get school teachers and college students and people that wanted to do it in a 6-week every day. They had to come every day. So it was pretty intensive, not just for them, but for me too.
Were you doing these trainings on Irwin Street studio?
Yeah. And one of the issues that we had was, as part of their training, they had to do classes. So they had to join our regular classes because I taught those as well. I was still basically the only instructor there. And, you know, all of a sudden, instead of having 8 people in the room, I'd have 18 people in the room. You know, so it got my regular students weren't real happy with all those teachers being in the room with them.
Well, Sue, let me interrupt you for a minute. What was your demographic? Where were your students? Where were your student teachers coming from? Did you drew from the local population?
The first couple groups, the first couple groups, I would say in 2008, in the summer of 2008, there were a lot of people from the studio that were interested in doing teacher training. But as it evolved and the word got out that there was a teacher training program here, I started drawing from a lot of different areas. When I opened the 200-hour training, I was about the 20th one in Georgia, in the state of Georgia, but I was only the 3rd 500-hour. So a lot of schools were getting people through the 200, but then they had nowhere to go
for advanced training.
So in my advanced training, I started to get a lot of students from all over the Southeast. Even now we have people that come from Miami and Stone Mountain and Chambly, Mississippi. I've had people that have gone through the program from St. Louis and Kentucky and all different places. Some of them came in to continue and finish or do their 500-hour, and a lot of those students stayed with me and did the yoga therapy, which is a whole other training that I started in 2011.
Right, okay. And the yoga therapy teacher training is like super advanced teacher training.
Yes,
highly intensive.
You have to be at a registered yoga teacher in order to do yoga therapy. So the definition of yoga therapy or a yoga therapist is a registered yoga teacher who has more hours, and my program was 600 hours. So they would have 600 hours of advanced training in the therapeutic modalities of yoga.
Yes.
So it was taking people to that next level.
It's a wonderful program. I did it. It's fabulous.
Yeah, you were one of the first people to go through.
And you started that program because your students, we in the class said, please, we want this advanced yoga therapy training.
I was graduating a lot of people from my programs, and after they would finish the 500, people would say, well, now what am I going to do? And I'm like, well, go to Kripalu or for Yogaville or something. They're like, no, we want you to do it. So it was the same way that I thought that I wasn't qualified to do the 200 in 2004. All of a sudden it's like 2010, and people were asking me to do yoga therapy. And I thought, well, I have been a yoga therapist, certified with Joseph LePage since back in 2007, and a lot of the private clients that I was attracting at the time were coming for yoga therapy.
Right.
So I was working as a yoga therapist. I was seeing a number of private clients a week who were coming for back pain or fibromyalgia or, you know, just stress-related issues that everybody that's human lives with. So I talked to the International Association of Yoga Therapists at the time, and I sent an application in to be a member school. And so in 2011, I started teaching yoga therapy. And you must have finished shortly after that.
I did.
2013
December 2013 is when I finished,
You know, I mean, most people would take at least 2 years to get through the program because it was an additional 600 hour after the original 2.
So Sue, you're doing teacher training, you're still doing 200, 500, and now the yoga therapy training.
Right, that started in 2011.
You're also running 2 studios.
Not yet.
Not yet, okay.
I only had one at that time.
All right.
So in 2011, I only had one, but now, like I had mentioned before, my students and our regular students were not real happy with all these teachers all of a sudden cramming in their space. And because I was doing yoga therapy, I needed a handicapped accessible place. It's hard to do yoga therapy and not have people be able to get in and out of the location.
With their wheelchairs?
With wheelchairs or even walkers, or have
Yes.
accessible parking, handicapped
Yes.
parking, you know, there were all those types of issues. Plus, because the teacher training was growing so much, some of our weekends we'd have 30, 40, 50 students in the teacher training program, especially when I had some of these guest instructors come in. So we just needed the space. It was just the right time to do it. Of course, my teachers who were working for me at the time goes, "Oh yeah, let's open another location, yeah. And Mike would go, "Are you crazy? Why would you want to open another location?" You know. So I was drawn between, you know, what I was hearing in one ear and what I was hearing in the other. And I had worked with a business mentor at the time when I first opened, a man out of Phoenix, Arizona, who was very helpful, seeing things from an objective point of view.
Yes.
So I called him back after a couple years and I said, "Jason, I'm thinking about opening another location and I need to get your opinion on it." And so he was like, "All right, let's do a pro and con list." And we sat down and figured out what the investment would be and how much I would lose if it didn't work. And we've gone like, well, yeah, that's probably not a really huge investment if that's the way it worked, if that's what would happen. So I started looking at locations to rent because, like I had mentioned, it wasn't a good time to sell real estate in 2011. So that's why we have two locations only about a mile apart. And it's such a big, long story to tell people. But we opened the second location in 2012. So we had our grand opening and our 10-year anniversary party here with the Chamber of Commerce opening in 2012.
Right.
So that opened because of the space, opened more possibilities of who I could have come in. So that's around the time that I started inviting who we would call really famous yoga people, famous in the yoga community, in to do workshops for us. For example, one of the first people that I had was Nikolai Bachman, who is a Sanskrit scholar and is also big on the language of Sanskrit, the language of yoga. So he came in and he was here 4 or 5 times. He was one of the most recent people that I've had. We also had Matthew Sanford from Minneapolis, Minnesota, who is in a wheelchair himself. So in order to have him here, we had to have handicapped accessible location. So I was offering a lot of different workshops. Some of them were for teacher training, and then some, like Matthew and Nikolai, would attract everybody that was interested in yoga. Because
people would come from out of state to there. Yeah.
So it was interesting to me that the more we had people traveling to come here, that I was actually bringing some benefit to the community other than just doing good for the people in the community.
Offering them better backs.
Just offering people a better lifestyle. But I was also, people were coming in, they were spending the night, we were eating out, they were flying
spending the weekend.
They were spending weekends here. So it seemed like I was really adding to the whole, community in lots of different ways, even people who weren't interested so much in yoga. So one of the really cool things that happened about that time is that I was nominated for Small Business of the Year through the Chamber of Commerce. I didn't get it that year, but being a yoga person and nominated in Bartow County was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I had come that far in 10 years from people asking, now what flavor of yoga are you going to teach? To being nominated as a business person who was really giving to the community in those ways. So I always think that is such a cool thing that happened as I developed with my business.
You continue to teach here. You have sold this business.
I have.
Your yoga business. When did you sell it to?
In October of 2018.
Okay.
I made the decision that I would like to slow down a little bit, and anybody that has their own business knows that your business is always with you. Like when you wake up first thing in the morning, you're like, okay, what do I have to do today? Or what wakes you up at night is like, did I make the mortgage payment this month? It's like those kinds of things. It's interesting how often people would call me at like 9 o'clock at night with questions about yoga and stuff, so I learned to turn my cell phone off eventually at night, but so you can't reach me after 9 o'clock.
Well, plus you go to bed with the chickens.
Well, that's true too.
Get up with
the
them.
sun. I go to bed with the sun. But so and my husband had retired about 3 years before that, or 2 years before that, and he wanted to be able to do stuff, and I was just very tied down with the business. And even when you're out of town, if the website goes down, you know, you're going to have to handle it. It was always there. So I actually have sold the yoga businesses, even though I still have the teacher training part of the business, and I'm easing out of that by the end of the year. But the actual studio businesses themselves, I had a student of mine who has taught here for years and partner with another local person here in town who owns a studio in Kennesaw. So Lisa Sinyard and Earl Hightower partnered together and offered me what I was asking. They said, well, that sounds fair, and we went to the attorney and signed the paperwork. It was like a matter of weeks probably by the time we got together and worked everything out. The attorney said, well, that was one of the easiest sales I've ever seen, because we agreed on everything. We thought everything was fair and equitable. So as part of the sale, I did tell them that I would stay and help with the transition for 6 months, that I wouldn't go open another yoga center within like 100-mile radius or something, which I had no intention of doing anyway. But I guess it just made them feel better knowing that I wasn't going to go open a yoga center, and that I would continue to stay and teach a number of classes a week. So at that time I was teaching about 10. Now I'm down to about 4, because I'm focusing just on, well, I do one level 2, but the other classes that I teach are definitely therapeutic focuses, was really where my heart is. I have 2 Better Backs classes a week.
And they just max out.
Yeah.
You can barely get a mat on this
often
floor.
they do, and the other therapeutic class that I teach is the seniors class. And then I do one level 2. So it has eased my schedule off a lot. I'm still doing teachers training, but like I said, I'm easing out of that by the end of the year as well. So it's leaving up some opening for Mike and I to do some things together, or to travel. Our 2 grandchildren live in Tucson, Arizona, which is really far away. So hopefully we'll get to visit with them more. And, you know, just kind of settle into that, maybe practicing yoga more than teaching it, practicing the yoga lifestyle more than teaching it. I have had an interesting thing happen. When I first started teaching yoga, I got very few referrals from physicians. I would get chiropractic referrals, but in the last couple years, I've gotten a number of referrals from doctors, and you know, people are being sent our way, which makes me realize that yoga therapy was really the way to go. But I have even had an allopathic physician in Cartersville ask me to do meditation for his clients, which it's so wonderful that they're open to those possibilities. And again,
and by allopathic, you mean this is an
internist.
Is he not a biomedical person?
A biomedical person, but he
open to meditation.
Sees that benefit and wants his clients or his patients to be able to connect in with it too. So who knows where it will lead, you know, if I get to do some things like that. But it takes all the pressure off of scheduling and running a business and being able to slow down a little bit.
And you've always loved teaching. I know
I do
that.
love teaching. I do.
And you are, I mean, I have been through your training, and you are a very fine teacher. You're demanding, you're kind, you're complimentary, but your students leave.
They have to work hard.
And they know the discipline. And let's talk for just a minute about where those students go.
Well, a number of the students locally have been through my teacher training.
Yes.
But we have also, over the years, had drawn people from different communities. So people who do my teacher training, or who have done my teacher training even back in 2008, have gone out into different communities and opened their own studios. Some of them who are experienced actually have their own teacher training programs now. So I feel like I threw the pebble in, you know, in the waves, just keep going out and out and out.
And you go as a guest teacher to their trainings
I do.
in
If
your
I'm
special areas,
If I'm
right?
invited to do that, I'll sometimes do that. But again, now with the position that I'm in, it takes the pressure off. Somebody else is running the program and making decisions, and I can just show up and teach, which is
Right,
really nice.
right.
Which is really
Exactly.
nice.
I want to go back just a little bit to the cancer center, or to the place in Rome,
Okay.
Many Springs.
Streams,
You have
many streams.
Many Streams,
Uh-huh.
Many Streams. You have your retreat there for your advanced teacher training.
I do
Students.
1 or 2 retreats there a year. It's a beautiful location, almost in Somerville. It's between Rome and Somerville. It's on, I don't know, hundreds of acres. And we do a chakra retreat there every year. It's part of the advanced teacher training, but I've had students go who are just really interested in that too.
It's for 5 days?
It's Monday through Friday.
Yes.
Yeah, for 5 days. And so we basically do about a chakra a day, a little bit, because there's 7 chakras. We do a little bit faster than that. But that has been a really nice retreat, you know, where people go to actually get away for a couple days. It's one thing to go take a yoga class and get a benefit of that, but when you can really get
Immerse yourself into
it. Yeah, immerse yourself into that whole lifestyle. People really appreciate that too.
Well,
And
I think it's very healing, and I'm sure it was very healing for the people, the cancer people healing
that
with cancer.
Many Streams retreat, like I said, was set up originally by an oncologist in Rome, and he would offer retreats there for people who had been through cancer treatments. And so he actually built the cabins and built the kitchen, and they have a saltwater swimming pool and
Yes.
mandala course, you know, where you can walk as a meditation. Originally, they actually had a sweat lodge up there years ago. This was in the early 2004, somewhere around there, that they would do as part of healing. And when they would do the retreats for the cancer patients, they would also have art therapy. They would do nutritional counseling, and then of course yoga and meditation. But they would do it, I think they do it twice a year maybe, I'm not even sure now, but because they have this beautiful retreat center and they were only using it a couple times a year, they opened it up on vacation by owner. And that's how
That was
I knew,
perfect
yeah,
for
it was
you.
perfect for me, and it's close enough that people with small children or other responsibilities know that if there was an emergency, they could get
back.
home, but it's far enough away that like you wouldn't run home because you forgot a pair of shoes or something, you know? So you kind of get there and get immersed in it, but you still are able to
Connect
know
with
that
the
you
outer
could
world.
if you had to, yeah.
Well, talking about Many Streams made me think of Myrtle, because that's where Myrtle, didn't she eat that weird frog and foam at the mouth? And you had fortunately had a yoga student who was an RN, and Myrtle was sort of your signature. Sue with Myrtle walking
She
around
was for
town,
a
and she
long
was here at the
time.
studio.
So Myrtle was a service dog.
Yes,
She was trained with
canine
thank
assistants.
you, canine assistants in Alpharetta,
yeah.
or that area. And I was looking for, whenever that was, in 2008 or so, something to volunteer. You know, it's one thing in my mind to give money to people who need it, and I know that that's a big part of contributing to society.
Right.
But I wanted to do something with my time. You know, I think people's time is sometimes more valuable
Yes.
than giving
Yes.
money. I mean, it's easier to give money than your time. And I was like really looking for a program that I could volunteer to do something, not what I ended up doing, but Mike was still working down off of Windy Hill, and they had a lady there who took puppies who were eventually going to be service dogs, and she used to bring them to work and try to get them under the desk and stay, you know, and basic commands. And I kind of thought that that's what I would be doing, so Canine Assistance was the closest place to me. So I went down and did a training with them. I had to go down for a week, and they said, well, since you're so far away, it's not, you know, there's no easy way to get to Alpharetta from here. I wanted to go down and like play with the puppies once a week or once a month or something like that. And they said, what we really need is somebody in your area to take one of our dogs and have the dog live with you and go with you to work. Could they go with work? And I'm going like, well, yeah, I own my own business. I guess I could take a dog to work if I wanted to. So I had to go through camp again for a week and learn. Myrtle was already trained, but what they were doing is training us how to take care of the dog.
Exactly.
She was about 18 months old at the time. They breed their own service dogs there, and they kind of weed them out for a number of reasons. But Myrtle could not be assigned to work as a service dog because she had a heart murmur. So that's, the dog becomes a volunteer, and part of what I agreed to do, other than take her all around town with her vest on and talk about the programs, which, you know, take a dog into Ingalls and you have to explain to all the kids why you get to bring your dog in the store and they don't. So we had a lot of conversations. It's kind of like having an 18-month-old child with you the whole time. But part of what I was doing for that organization was fundraising. So Myrtle and I would go around and we would talk to, you know, any civic organizations. I went to Boy Scouts. I used to go do reading programs at the library where kids got to read to Myrtle, and went to a couple of the schools a couple times. I went to Cartersville High School for a nursing program to show what service dogs could do. And they open doors and pick up pencils and do all kinds of stuff like that. That is kind of cool. But she was a pet as well.
Well, she was absolutely adored at the studio.
People loved her. Remember when I used to tell her to go to work and she'd lay underneath the table and she would not move until I rang the chime, and then she was like, okay, I can get up now. And I used to joke with my students at the end of a yoga class, we say namaste, which means the good in me honors the good in you and we are one. But when Myrtle heard us say namaste, I said that she thinks that means the dog can move. Now she's able to get up and walk around the room and she'd go visit everybody. And yeah, she was a cool addition to the yoga centers for a while.
She seemed to always go to people who
needed her.
That's who she'd go to first.
She would.
So yeah, that was. That's a good way to think of namaste.
So the dog can move.
And so can you, much better from having been in this class.
So that was my evolution of yoga from, you know, for the last 20 years, from starting teaching in '99 till I sold the business in 2008. No, 18, not 8. 2018.
2018.
Last year, October of 2018. And now, like I said, I'm getting the people who are currently enrolled in my teachers training programs finished, and then I'm going to ease out of that at the end of the year too. And I'm not sure what the new owners will do, if they'll do another teacher training on their own or what they'll decide, but it'll be their responsibility. So, but I'll come in and guest instruct if they want me to.
Well, and many people in the community will want you to. People depend on you for their backs. I mean, you are known as the better backs person.
Which is interesting because that's why I got into yoga originally, was because of back. So I really know what helps and, you know, what makes it feel better. I tell my teachers, if they're like, oh, I had this knee thing going on, and they're so unhappy because, you know, yoga teachers aren't supposed to have issues, right?
Oh, please.
Yeah. And I say, you know what, you're learning what to do with your knee because you're going to have a lot of knee people in your classes.
You're going to have to teach it.
You're going to have to teach it, yeah. So hopefully, you know, as I slow down, Mike and I will be able to do things together. We've been married 45 years and I still want to spend time with him, so I guess that's a good thing.
Well, he's a lot of fun. I can see why you would want to.
Get to travel maybe, if I don't know, or maybe just sit on the porch.
Well, I can't see you slowing down really, Sue. I can't
or maybe
say,
just putting my energies in different things,
and using it the way you want to. Well, what do you, two things. One, what are you the most proud of in terms of your work in the community, your contribution to the community, your business, your teaching, your creativity, and your healing? What sort of comes to the surface for you? I
think the thing that means the most to me is the fact that I could help people. That, you know, I could give them, like I had said at the beginning, the tools to do something good for themselves rather than just go and have somebody else fix you.
Sure.
And I think I've really touched a number of people in the community, and because of the teacher training program, I've touched hundreds of people that I don't even know.
Exactly.
I've probably had about 200 teachers go through my programs, And they're out in all different states, all over, Kentucky, St. Louis, Mississippi, all different places, taking that message of health and healing and the strength that's really within each of us to heal ourselves. And that message is getting out all over the place.
Yes,
and that is just such a wonderful feeling to know, hopefully not from an ego point of view that I was able to help people, but just that those tools are out there, and it's really the yoga that does the work, but it still needs a voice. We need people to go out.
Well, and it has to be accessible to people.
Accessible to all people,
accessibility, whether it's handicap, whether it's, just people in an area.
We all live in human bodies, so we're all going to have some issues or ailments. All you have to do is live long enough. Like Matthew Sanford says, if you're aging, you're living with disability. So, so that lets all of us know that it's only a matter of time, till we have to deal with something on our own. And I just hope that what I've done over the period of time that I've been in the community is giving people those tools that they can take care of themselves.
I'm sure there are many, many who would agree with you. I think that's a good place to end.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Sue. We've enjoyed this so much. You have so much to tell and share, and you've done it beautifully. We appreciate it. It was wonderful.
Thank you.